the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kate, could we have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Gary Cunningham.
Here.
Patty Crowan.
Here.
Bruce Robinson.
Here.
Sean Keir.
Here.
Miles Schlesinger.
Here.
And Doug Bryson is absent. And Steve Griffiths.
Here.
Thank you.
Are there any agenda changes or revisions?
No, there aren't.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for our meeting on March 21st?
I motion we approve the minutes of March 21st, 2017.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes have been approved. All right, we do have no public comments. No one is in the audience tonight. No final orders or resolutions. No public hearings or deliberations. No old business scheduled and no new business scheduled. We do have training for the Planning Commission. So, Mr. Townsend, you have it. You're on.
Had something. Okay. This is taken from a presentation I gave in the Rural Development Initiatives on a webinar last year. It was my piece of a three-person presentation about workforce housing. So, I went through several tools that can be used in promoting affordability. The first is accessory dwelling units. And this is a dwelling unit that can be built on lawful lots in addition to the main house. It can be part of the house or it can be disconnected, standalone. It has in Lincoln City, we have a size limitation of 750 square feet or 50% of the size of the main dwelling, whichever is less. And a reduced parking requirement as well. It's one parking space instead of two that's required for most dwellings. Obviously, this doubles the density and takes advantage of existing infrastructure, so provides housing without having to extend sewer and water service beyond its existing limits.
Please.
Into the microphone.
Right. Do those accessory dwelling units always connect to the main house, or do they ever go to the street?
They can be part of the main house, they can be standalones, they can be a second floor on a detached garage, so anything.
Right. Is there a circumstance where we would envision permitting the accessory dwelling unit in advance of the construction of the main house?
Well, it becomes the house. So yes, it could happen. It would be the house on the lot. It would just be small, and you'd want to leave space for the main house. And we also have a provision allowing what we're calling cottage clusters, which are, as it says here in Lincoln City, 4 to 12 smaller dwelling units, less than 1,250 square feet each. They're centered around a common area also with a reduced parking requirement, and that parking varies based on the size of the unit. It goes up as the unit gets bigger. And we allow them at double the normal density. So what you do if you had a couple of acres, you could get twice as many houses on that as would be allowed, like an R15 zone. 5,000 square feet is 11/100ths of an acre, so you could get 9 units in an acre. With a cottage cluster, you could get 18 units per acre.
Do we have any examples of that here in town?
Almost. We had one developer we were talking with who, for his own reasons, decided not to go with a cottage cluster and just go with normal housing.
Richard, is there any requirement for them to look at impact to streets that they are adjacent to or feeder streets to those clusters?
Well, part of the approval process would be looking at the impacts on the street and whether the streets were sufficient to serve it. Is that what you're asking?
One more question. Where you have reduced parking requirements, is that because you'd only allow one house per unit? And would it be off-street parking?
It's off-street parking. We do allow on-street parking immediately adjacent to the development. That would count. But the reduced parking requirement is just essentially on the assumption that smaller houses means fewer people, which means fewer cars. It also is a requirement that there be guest parking, though, in addition to the other required parking.
So if they had, for instance, 6 units on their cluster, what would be allowable?
It would depend on the size of the houses. Somewhere between 1 and 2 parking spaces per unit, again, just depending on the size of the units. And if you go to the nearest whole number, actually the higher whole number. So if you get one of the units, if you only have one unit that requires 1.5 parking spaces, it's going to require 2, because you just round up to the next highest number. So it goes 1, 1.5, and 2 per unit.
Richard? Is there, it says less than 1,200 square feet each. Is there a minimum structure size, house size, and is there a minimum lot size?
There is, in zoning, there is not a minimum structure size, except for a manufactured home, which is required to be at least 1,000 square feet. But for a site-built home, there is no minimum lot size, or minimum structure size. There is in the building code and fire code some basically minimum room sizes. So that becomes the effective minimum that would be required for a dwelling unit. And they're pretty minimal. We recently had a house built in Lincoln City. I think I'll have a picture of it later on. It's 683 square feet. So it can be pretty small.
And the lot size?
So lot size, well, the smallest one we normally allow is 5,000 square feet, but through a PUD process, they can be smaller as long as you don't exceed the density, and we allow them smaller for cottage clusters as well, as long as you don't go beyond the allowed density.
So there isn't a number like a 50-50, 2,500?
Not necessarily. It's just based on the density. It could even be smaller than 2,500. It just depends on what the developer wants to do. And actually, this is a misleading slide because these really aren't cottage clusters. This is 2 sets of duplexes that. The upper picture from the street looks like a single-family home. If you look at the extreme right of extreme left of the upper photograph, there is a home that looks essentially like the next 3, and the one on the extreme left is a single-family home detached, and the next 3 are 1/2 of a duplex. With it from the street, it ends up looking like one house. We also allow mixed use, which is commercial and residential uses in the same building. It can be in the same building, or actually in some places it also can be in separate buildings, but with the commercial required to be in the front. There are places in Lincoln City where we require mixed use. Taft along 101 and 51st Street is a good example of that. But we do allow mixed use in all commercial zones in Lincoln City now. It has the advantage of putting people where jobs are, and also putting more eyes on the street, so it ends up creating a safety benefit. And we can have a situation where the parking requirement is reduced because of difference in time of use of the parking. Commercials generally during business hours, residences, usually, often the vehicles are gone during normal business hours because people are at work. This is the 683 square foot house I was telling you about. We don't have a minimum structure size other than what the building code requires. And this was on a regular sized lot, but the owner just wanted to build a smaller house. And there is what's called tiny houses. We allow them right now, just as we allow any other house. In the process of drafting some provisions for your consideration and City Council consideration in the near future, looking at how we want to allow so-called tiny houses at perhaps higher density. We allow recreational vehicles in an RV park at 1 per 1,200 square feet. Some tiny houses are in fact recreational vehicles. They meet the recreational vehicle standards. The ones on wheels are not much different from a park model recreational vehicle. In fact, in the picture on the right here, that is a park model RV. On the left is a tiny house, actually on a place where they were building tiny houses, a manufacturer of tiny houses in Albany. So we're looking at the possibility of maybe allowing tiny houses the same way we allow RVs. That'll be something for you to consider.
Sense of how much houses like that cost, or?
You know, it really depends on how much you trick them out. They're not super cheap. I think that one on the left there, as I recall, it was in the vicinity of $30,000. There was one on the lot that actually the owner was building himself. They're allowing him to build it there. I'll bet it cost more than my house. It was just a copper roof and all kinds of stuff. It was just incredible. It was a big tiny house, but it was still would classify as a tiny house. But it was
It'll be there forever.
yeah, it had a lot of bells and whistles on it. And there's also something called the big house, which looks like a single-family house, but it's really a small apartment building. You could think of it as this one in this picture is in, I believe, in Portland, and it contains 4 units. You can see the stairs going up to the second floor. There's 2 sets of stairs going into the upper floor apartments, and you can see an entry to the lower floor below that. So this actually has 4 units in it. And it's conceivable to allow these kinds of things with having a higher density to, again, make better use of the infrastructure and so on. This is an example, sort of a detail of a proposal that was submitted to the city a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. It shows along Logan Road at the left there. It was that area that was clear-cut in the proposal from the property owner to annex the property. It included a development plan. And you can see on the left side there's 5 structures with the brown. Those were going to be big 4-unit big houses, the original plan for that. But the council elected not to annex that property, so it was not built. You can see that development was going to include over on the right-hand side some townhomes and also single-family detached homes as well.
And why didn't that go through?
The council elected not to annex it. That was a former council. I'm not sure what would happen with the current council. The council has complete discretion on annexation. They can annex or not annex, it just, as they don't have to.
But doesn't that seem counter to what the Logan Road and that development was fought, that they wanted to annex that, and it's right next door, isn't it?
Right, it's right next to Rhodes End. Yeah. Actually, it would be in, in the overall Rhodes End area that was annexed, because it's north of 51st Street, which is where the annexation started.
Seems odd.
No, I think one of the considerations was the return on investment for the city, the infrastructure we would have had to put in to support that, if I remember correctly.
That was one issue, was the streets and the road and water and sewer system, and the cost of maintaining that.
Very challenging terrain.
Yeah, it is an extremely challenging site.
So can the owner develop it through the county?
Yes, but we will provide water service to properties outside the city limits at the rate of one hookup per lot, existing lot. This property was 2 lots. So they could get 2 water hookups from the city, only 2. And I think the proposal was how many, was it like 80 units or something? Yeah,
But that property is only 2 lots.
right. It hasn't been subdivided. Right? Then we also have in our planned unit development ordinance a provision allowing density bonus. If 5% of the units you put in, you can have 10% are affordable housing. If you get 5% of the units you build are count as affordable, and you could have 10% more units than the zoning ordinarily would allow. The idea behind that is that the extra 5 units would subsidize the 5 affordable housing units.
How is affordable housing defined in that example?
It's not defined, but we do have a working standard that we've been using, which was something that would be affordable to someone making 60 to 120% of the average income for the county, and by being affordable to them, so it wouldn't be a housing burden. If it's rental property, it would require 30% or less of their gross income for rent and utilities. And if it's owner-occupied housing, it would same 30% for mortgage and utilities. And if you look at statistics for Lincoln City, we have a very, very high rate of rent-burdened and mortgage-burdened properties.
Are there any examples of that being implemented here in Lincoln City?
No. Actually, we put this in right before the recession hit. So it was a tool that we put there, and then no one had an opportunity to use it. We'll see what happens in the future.
Richard, would
We
you,
may end up taking advantage of ourselves as the owners of the Villages of Cascade Head property to get more in.
would you back up about a paragraph? You said a sentence that started with, "We have a very high rate of," and then I garbled the rest.
Rent burdened and mortgage burdened,
We have a high rate of rent and mortgage burdened people.
right, about half as I recall.
Half?
Yeah. I think we can bring you information on that quickly, because a couple months ago, when the library began working on their master plan, Allison Robertson from the Urban Renewal Agency and I did a little presentation on those kinds of numbers, and we can probably reprise that here. I know you're interested in those kinds of
I'm
numbers.
very interested in that. I'd like to know what are the demographics of Lincoln City and how they drive housing density needs as well as our failure or success in satisfying the need.
Maybe on April 18th, we can have that for you.
Thank you.
And the legislature last time passed a bill that authorized inclusionary zoning. Until that was passed, inclusionary zoning was illegal in Oregon. And inclusionary zoning is requiring developers to build affordable housing. What the new law in Oregon applies to when you're building more than 20 units, allows a jurisdiction, a city or a county, to say that when you're building 20 units or more, up to 20% of them can be required to be affordable housing, but it does require incentives in exchange for that. And it's something that I haven't had time to take a really hard look at yet to see whether we want to do anything like that, or bring any kind of proposal forward. Inclusionary zoning often is pretty controversial. It's been our practice in the past to be more carrot than stick oriented, and this is pretty stick oriented. And also, the law allows cities and counties to impose a construction excise tax. Because the school district has an excise tax where they collect about $1 per square foot for on new construction, and this law allows us to do the same thing with that money to be going towards affordable housing. Again, the city has not done that. I don't know if anybody in Lincoln County has done that at all or not. I don't think so.
Richard, incentives in exchange, is that just density or what other kinds of incentives?
I don't remember what it is. I don't remember. I think there can be SDC reductions and tax reductions, deferrals, at least deferrals, if not forgiveness.
What's meant by the last bullet there, authorizes fee and loop
That would allow, instead of building affordable housing, make a payment into an affordable housing fund for the local jurisdiction to provide it. So we pay a fee instead of having to actually do the construction. And then there's...
Carbon tax.
Sorry?
It sounds a little like a carbon tax where you can shuffle it off to other jurisdictions.
Right. Then, as a policy matter, we're required to have a 20-year supply of buildable land. So in other words, have enough land within the city and the urban growth boundary to allow for building housing of various types and various rent or mortgage levels. And in order to make sure we have that, we do buildable lands inventory. And we have one that's almost done now. The draft is done, and we'll be having a meeting on that on the 12th, the committee that's been working on that. So that helps to say where we may need to go in terms of our policies, whether we change our zoning to allow density or look at annexation or changes in the size of the UGB and that kind of thing. So we have that underway now. As I said, it's almost done. And concurrent with that, in the same project, is an economic opportunities analysis, which is essentially a buildable lands inventory for commercial, and what's the third thing? Second thing, housing needs. Oh, a housing needs assessment. In addition to the buildable lands inventory, a housing needs assessment to see predict essentially what kind of housing we'll need going out, so that would feed into the buildable lands inventory as well, just to see exactly what we need, because people's desires, housing styles change, and what people are looking for changes. So we want to try to make sure that we're in step with that, and not limiting people to require housing that people don't want, a type of housing that people don't want, that kind of thing. And another policy matter for cities is to look at system development charges and property taxes, and with possibly reducing them to encourage affordable housing, or to defer them, even a minor deferral. We usually collect system development charges at the time we issue a building permit. Builders have told us that it's to a great advantage if we don't collect it until the house is done, because the cost of money, it costs them money to have that money out of pocket. It's not minor for a single-family house. We've reduced them recently by a few $1,000s, but I think it's still in the vicinity of about $10,000 per unit. So, but we're also, I expect we will take another look at how we impose system development charges in the not-too-distant future. Some places like to do it based on the square footage of the structure. We don't do it that way. We just do it for single family. It's normally just, it's the same for everything, and then there's a percentage of that for multifamily. Some places do it based on the number of fixtures that you have. So a small house, like a one bathroom house, will have fewer fixtures, obviously, than a 2 or 2.5 bathroom house. And something that we've done in Lincoln City is looking at infrastructure capacity, look at our water and sewer system, and through urban renewal funding in particular, put in paid for infrastructure that a developer might ordinarily have to pay for. The pump station in these photos is up at the north end of town, West Devils Lake Road and 101. And the improvements and reconstruction on, no, actually this one is at the new water tank. Yeah, but still, we put about $1 million in investment into infrastructure at the north end, because our system capacity there, without these improvements, basically meant the next house that would be built would have to come up with $1 million worth of improvements. I mean, we were at capacity. So put this in to allow more development at the north end of town, Lincoln Palisades, the lower part of the village is a Cascade Head, and Neatsu in that area. The parts of Neatsu that are served by sewer, that is, and in the city. And another thing that can cost developers and raise the cost of houses is the street standards, the width, and what all has to be on it. We have come up with street cross-section standards for local streets that can allow for a narrower street, which obviously costs less to make, and for grading, for paving, and that sort of thing. And also less for maintenance, because there's less to maintain. So it ends up being less of a burden on the city, but also those infrastructure costs, the initial infrastructure costs for a new development get passed through to the purchasers of the homes. So if we can reduce those costs, then what it ends up costing the new home purchasers is less. And we've also been fortunate enough to have an affordable housing fund that was established. That was established and paid for initially through, as I mentioned, in areas that are outside the city limits that want to get water. They get one per lot, unless the council decides, and it's totally up to the city council, that they will give more hookups to that property. And what they've done in the past was, if someone wanted to put in a number of lots, and the council thought it was a good idea, they would say, okay, you can do it, but it's going to cost you X $1,000 per lot for a water hookup, and that fund goes into the Affordable Housing Fund. Most of that money was used recently, to help with the purchase of the Villages at Cascade Head property, and we will be recapturing that as the Villages property is developed or sold. It's possible that rather than build affordable housing there, but it's possible we could trade land there for other land that would be built with affordable housing. So there's a lot of options there, but part of that money was used for the Villages, and so we expect to make sure that it is used appropriately and that it is recaptured, either in affordable housing or in a swap for affordable housing land. We also have used surplus city lots for the Land Trust and Habitat for Humanity, so that they can build low-cost housing on them.
Richard, can I ask about that? Does the city still have a pretty good inventory of surplus lots that can be used
No.
for this purpose?
No, we don't. These were a few, we still have some. I know there's a couple down in Taft, and we're having sort of internal debates about what should be done with those. They're just I think 4,000 square foot lots on the east side of the highway, but it's in the tsunami zone and in a flood zone, and we're thinking, what do we want to do with that? What's the right thing to do? And we have a few other lots as well around the city, but there's very few that we have left that are just individual lots. Now, the next bullet point on here is that we bought the Villages at Cascade Head PUD, and we bought 363 acres of land there, so in that sense that we have a lot of it. But for what I was talking about in that second bullet point there was just that we had a few lots that made sure they went for affordable housing purposes. We have a couple of other areas that we're looking at very close to Kurtz's Park that are not individual lots, but they're like a few acres, and figuring out exactly what to do with those as well. And my closing in giving this presentation was to make some suggestions, and one was I think that the reason we haven't seen a lot of these things happen in Lincoln City is that people don't know that there are possibilities. I was at Kylo's a couple of weeks ago talking to a builder, and I mentioned to him about accessory dwelling units, and he had no idea that such a thing was possible in Lincoln City. And his eyes just lit up and saw some great opportunities there. Because it cuts your land cost in half, which is a pretty big deal. So they need to be publicized. We'll be working on that. Things to reduce or eliminate upfront costs are important, and that's infrastructure costs and whatever money a builder has to shell out at the beginning rather than at the end can make a difference. It's important for the policymakers, for the planning commissioners and city council members to know what these options are and what else there might be. I mentioned I'm working on an ordinance for discussion and so on, but one thing I'm also looking at including in that, in addition to things like allowing tiny houses or big houses, is sort of a PUD, planned unit development light thing, calling innovative housing option, which basically is you got a good idea, come and tell us what it is, and we'll see whether it works, you know. And that would be a matter of coming before the planning commission and saying, is this a good idea, do you think, and do you want it to happen? So,
That kind of calls for a fair to, where people can explore all these various recommendations, developers as well as policymakers. You know, what's working in other Oregon communities, what you can do here that you may not know about. And,
there's a lot of communication among planners in Oregon about these things, and we're fortunate. We're really in the forefront of a lot of these things, but we need to. The main thing is get them publicized and people know about them. There's only so much that the city can do. The market decides a lot. The lenders decide an awful lot. What they will lend money on. They like things that they're familiar with, don't like things they're not familiar with. They don't like condos right now. I think they can even be leery of attached single family, those kinds of things. The final thing is to watch for hidden traps, because a good example of that was a mixed-use project that people didn't realize that because you had commercial on the bottom and residential on top, there's fire separation issues that you don't see in a single-use structure. So it increased the costs beyond what they were expecting, not beyond what's normal, but beyond what they were expecting. So it caused some consternation, so you just have to be aware of that kind of thing. That is what I have.
thank you, Richard. Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. We're a planning commission, and, you think of that as sort of being proactive, and yet we seem to, our actions are reactive to what's brought to us. And I'm wondering, is there any avenue by which the planning commission can be more proactive? I'm thinking, for example, we heard a presentation when we were hearing about the Parks Department, about an area, a piece of property owned by the city, and Ms. Nicholson did a nice little hand drawing of what sort of she thought could go on there, and some of it would be expensive, but others not so expensive, and perhaps with the right type of partnerships with volunteer organizations. And I'm just wondering what can this commission do, if anything, that is more of a proactive approach to getting some of these things actually done?
One thing you can do is insist that staff brings things forward to you, these kinds of things. You're right now in the lull before the storm, I think, for a number of things, because we have the comprehensive plan update about to begin, and the visioning process for that will be kicking off very soon. And I think being involved in that is really important, because that's going to shape which way the city goes for the next, conceivably, 20 years. But bring up ideas. There's lots of things that can be done. In large measure, your job is reactive, because it's your job to make decisions on applications that require planning commission approval. But I think you'll find through the comprehensive plan update and the other things that will be going on with the like getting the buildable lands inventory and those kinds of things, I think you'll have more opportunities to chime in. And I'll be thinking of more.
How is the buildable lands inventory tied to the envisioning program that is going to start next month?
The buildable lands inventory it's looking at where we are now and what our population growth is expected to be and what housing will, how much land is needed for those people over the next 20 years. The visioning can focus more on, okay, this much land is needed, what do we want that to look like? How do we want it to be developed? Do we want single-family homes only? Do we want a diversity of home types? There's lots of things. How do we want things to happen? The housing needs, or the buildable lands inventory is essentially just making sure that there's enough land to do what we think we want to do. And then the question for the visioning is, what do we want to do with what our need is?
Well, I heard that the property that makes up the villages potentially has 1,800 home sites, so that could take care of a lot of growth over the next 50 years, based at our rate that Lincoln City is experiencing now. But I would assume you want to spread the buildable lands over the length of Lincoln City rather than concentrate all of our growth in the villages.
Right, absolutely. The villages, when it was approved in 1998, was approved for 1,829 units, as you mentioned, 1,800. That plan was extremely optimistic, and I think economically and from an economic standpoint as well as from an engineering standpoint, I think it was just an unworkable plan. We are starting off a new planning effort for the villages, another thing you can be involved in, so to see what would be the best thing to do with the village's land, given economic and engineering realities.
Even if
I would expect that a substantial amount of the property in the villages of Cascade Head, besides being very steep sloped and very high, it was just probably is not economic to develop, at least for many, many years. And so that can be put perhaps to other use, recreational use or what have you. But obviously, we don't want, as the landowner of the villages of Cascade Head, to be the only place that development can happen in the city.
For example, we also will be approving the Nelscott Gap Plan, which calls for development in the southern part of the city.
Right, right. And we want to come up with a plan. We're hoping to get funding for our plan for Logan Road and 101 area. Not the village's property, but other privately owned property in the area.
Any more questions? Sean?
Yes, please. Are we as a city looking for developers? Are we actively searching for developers that, like, luring them in with good deals, or are we waiting for somebody to have an idea?
We made an abortive effort to market part of the villages of Cascade Head property, but I think it was too vague, because basically we're saying we have this land, give us a good idea, and it didn't have the certainty that developers want. We have this land, here's what you can build on it, and here's what it's going to cost you to build. We just said, here's this land, tell us what you want to do and how much you want to pay for it. And it was just, we didn't get much in the way of response for that. I put in our budget for the coming year some money for someone who has a better idea how to market the land to actually market it. But I think we'll be holding off and figuring out exactly what we want to do until the planning effort for the village's Cascade Head property is completed.
How far afield do we go when we market something like Cascade Head?
How, well, we tried to market in the Portland area. We advertised there and as well as here.
We put a tremendous amount of effort into the comprehensive plan for the Nelscott area and spent a lot of money on that. Is it possible that we would perform this same level of effort to design and market the villages?
Essentially, yes.
What would kick off that kind of financial and emotional investment, do you think?
We just sent out a contract we selected a consultant, actually the same consultant as did the Nelscott area, to do that for the villages of Cascade Head.
So that it is funded, or?
It is funded.
Okay. Thank you.
We're about to start the work.
Okay. Good outfit.
Gary?
Richard, I know we're doing the housing needs and the inventory at the same time, because I think is there some kind of a state requirement that we address the housing needs, or is that just our desire, or is there, is there?
The state requirement is for the buildable lands inventory. And we also need the economic opportunities analysis, which basically is another land inventory, but for commercial and industrial purposes. Those are both required by state law. The housing needs assessment is closely related to that, but it's not something that's required.
So we have no obligation to provide housing or try to provide housing for those people who can't afford to work here.
We have an obligation to make sure there's enough land in the city and the urban growth boundary to provide housing for the people who live and work and vacation here. One thing, our housing is so skewed compared to the rest of the state. There's more than a third of our housing, the largest piece of our housing, I mentioned this before, is second homes, vacant homes. The next largest is rental homes, about a third, and then less than a third is owner-occupied. But we have this huge number of vacant homes that aren't on the market, aren't available for people to use. And I'm not talking about just vacation rentals, because there's over 2,000 housing units in Lincoln City that the census classes as vacant because they're second homes. There's about 500 vacation rentals in Lincoln City.
On top of that?
It's part of that.
Say those numbers again, Richard. 1,000?
2,000.
There's about 2,000 second homes, including about 500 vacation rental dwellings.
So roughly 2,000 full-time residential residences and a couple of thousand full-time rentals. Is that roughly $2,000 each, something like that?
But the second homes is say the largest third. So
What do we do about that?
Why do we need to?
I don't know if we need to do anything about it. We just need to make sure that that we factor that kind of thing in when we're figuring out how much housing is needed or how much land is needed for housing. That if we build 100 housing units in Lincoln City, 35, 36, 37 are going to be second homes.
I think that trend's just going to continue.
And it's a big part of the market here. And it's often people buying them, in their 40s or 50s, and they think, okay, I'm going to retire here, but I'll have this house for second home for now. So.
Oh, the house I'm living in now is a second home for years and years and years. Yeah.
Yeah, the cool thing about second homes is they still pay property taxes on them.
Yeah.
Gary? Yeah.
But they don't provide places for our workforce to rent.
Right.
That's very true.
Right. So it does require the city to provide a lot more infrastructure than you would think would be needed for a city of our size or our population. And not just infrastructure, but things like just our provide enough water, police more than you would think of for a city of our population, but we just have that need to do that.
That-
It's part of being a
That is a self-inflicted.
tourist town.
It is self-inflicted, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
We have a policy that we want to encourage as much tourism as possible, and a lot of empty homes during the wintertime is the price we pay for that.
This is kind of I'm not sure how to ask this question, but would building, if I were a developer, and could I make a sufficient profit from building tiny homes on property I own as compared to putting in
That's
large
a,
vacation homes?
I can't answer that. I believe you can. It's just what I think we've been seeing is, you can make a reasonable, or you can make a profit building small homes, building tiny homes, but I think builders recognize that they can make a bigger profit on a bigger home. If the land cost is the same,
So the
that bigger
challenge
pro-
is to lower the land cost. There's some way of doing it.
well, and we're proposing that by allowing accessory dwelling units, allowing double density for cottage clusters and other affordable housing things.
We have to be
One of the
careful.
things is we don't have big developers here. If I'm a developer and I build, 2 or 3 or 4 houses a year, I want to maximize my profit, and chances are I'm going to just choose to build the bigger houses that sell at a higher price and give me a higher profit. But that's the builder's call, and they can make that call. If they see an opportunity, see a market, I'm sure that people will go for it. As I said, I think a lot of builders don't even know it's possible to do some of these things. So we need to get the word out on that.
I think going back to Patty's question, the Planning Commission gets our intersection with this thing, I think, is kind of a policy question of when does a nice, cute little cottage community or a tiny home community become a shanty town? Circumstances change. No, I know. But it does go to where does the Planning Commission intersect with these policies that were presented up here? And right now, the world is agog at the homeless problem, and homeless veterans female homeless veterans are having people buy little tiny home communities for them in Portland, things like that, because we love the idea, but 3 years from now, we're going to move on to some other du jour and be potentially left with a whole bunch of shanty towns around the place, and I'm concerned about little shanties in high-density neighborhoods when our focus changes away from the homeless problem to some other problem.
There's a host of policy issues in all of these things. Anyway, anything that we do.
Gary?
I've got one more, since we're running out of questions. This is pretty obscure, but what are we doing as a planning commission for August 21st? Are we doing anything?
You are likely to be getting an ordinance allowing temporary uses in general, and setting up a situation where essentially staff can say, for this particular event, we're going to allow certain temporary uses.
Like camping on the beach?
Well,
I
the
didn't hear
beach,
you
the
guys.
beach isn't ours.
What was that?
Camping on the beach?
Well, like
The
camping on
beach
the
is not
knoll.
ours, so,
Camping on the knoll.
We don't have enough.
well, I expect that people will want to do that. Whether we decide we want to allow that remains to be seen, and that's a city council decision.
So it seems
So-
like we've finished our training and we've segued into
Eclipse?
Eclipse. Or do you have anything else you'd like to tell us?
No, I'm done.
Okay, any more questions
Yeah,
to Richard?
as long as we went there. Do you know what the city has budgeted for the aftermath of the eclipse? I suspect that there's going to be some debris. There could be some public health issues associated with relaxed use in certain areas.
I don't know what's been budgeted for that. I know that, I think last time that the city manager mentioned just the eclipse in general, I think we're talking about it was going to probably cost us in the vicinity of $50,000. That's all the porta potties, but
40?
no, it's more than that now. But the thing is, there aren't that many porta potties out there. I mean, everybody,
I'm sure that's
everybody
true.
wants them. And,
That's the business to be in this year.
There have been, I've heard of instances of porta potty companies gouging, like we were reading about
$1,000
owners of gouging. But there's things like cleanup, police overtime.
Fire.
The fire's not the city, but it's, the fire district will have its expenses. We expect to establish essentially a couple of command posts or response posts, one in the north end of town, one in the south end of town, because we expect the highway to be clogged. So there's lots of things. There's a huge planning effort going on. It's
And do you know when the next meeting is scheduled? I know, I went to the first one that Chandler scheduled.
I don't know in terms of public meetings, but I believe from, well, I was going to say tomorrow for staff, but I don't think that's going to happen because our emergency planning director won't be there. But I'm not sure when it will be, but the staff's meeting on this very regularly and working hard on it. I think the porta potty thing is, it's a distraction. It's a relatively minor issue, because, I mean, we have, I don't know how many permanent restroom facilities.
Sure.
If you're coming here and staying in a hotel, you've got a restroom in your room,
I
all
don't
the
think the
houses have them.
concern, I don't think that's the concern. I think, at least what I'm hearing up in my end, up in Rhodes End, is if the camping, if the beach is allowed, if camping occurs on the beach, even if it doesn't, if the density in the houses is extreme, lots of cars, no way to get in and out, so emergency access will be compromised. But also, you look up the tide table, it's a minus 1.6 tide at 7 in the morning. So it's likely that some knuckleheads are going to decide to go around the point at 7 in the morning and
Camp out.
park themselves over there until 10 when the eclipse occurs, and then not be able to get back. And that's just one example of sort of an emergency response issue that I think the people up in, at least in Rhodes End, are a little concerned about. And I don't know how you address that, but
Yeah, we're aware of that kind of issue, and things like people camping up on the knoll, and fire issues around that, and sanitation's issues around that.
I think those are the main ones.
I've heard people talking about, I don't know if that's going to be required, or if it, but, there are places where the federal government, if they allow you to go in there to this federally owned land, you take a sealed bucket with you, and everything you take in, you bring back out.
Sure.
And then basically, the waste goes into the bucket, and it's closed, and you take
Like a
it.
paint bucket.
Yeah, like a paint bucket, exactly. Yeah. So,
Well, thank you, Richard. Any more questions?
Well, I think I should probably defer this to the reports and comments and questions and so forth, but I would like to, as you requested earlier, insist that you bring back some kind of a report on our preparedness for the eclipse and the aftermath, if you would, please.
I'll see if I can get that to happen.
Thank you.
Richard, our city attorney, do you have any reports for us, comments?
I was going to spend about 45 minutes talking about transferable development rights. No,
Would you please?
no, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that now, but it is something I would like to talk to you about in the future, but it's really too...
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would like to talk about it in the future, the issue, but I'd like to do it in coordination with Richard. I just was trying to make him freak out a little bit. But in the future, I would like to talk about the concept of transfer development rights, especially as regards to villages. And I think one of the things I'd like to see, if we're just talking here, is the addressing standards for annexation. Like in the city of Ashland, if you annex, you have to meet the following minimum standards. One, you have to provide X number of units or X percentage of units of affordable housing. So it's kind of like when we did Logan Park, we did a negotiated development agreement. Also, I'd like to talk to you about those. But one of the sticking points became, okay, they're going to offer to do some affordable housing. How many? Well, we didn't have any real teeth to say, sorry, you're not going to get annexed unless you're providing at least this minimum number. And so I'd like to talk to you, but I'd like to coordinate that with Richard, not just drop it on you here at the meeting. So.
Thank you. Yeah. Planning Commissioners, any questions or reports? Okay. No public comments. We don't have public here. And our next meeting is on April 18th. Right? Thank you very much for your presentation tonight, Richard. We appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. All right. The meeting is adjourned.
Richard, what time is the April 12th buildable lands inventory meeting?
2 to 5.
In the council room?